The human they couldn't break. The arena was silent. Thousands of aliens, tall, scaled, and armored, sat still, waiting. The sky above was dark with clouds, and the wind carried the smell of blood and dust. In the center of the stone pit stood a human man. His name was Cain. He had no armor, just torn clothes, a swollen eye, and blood dripping from his lip. Chains had been removed from his wrists just minutes ago. His hands were scarred. His chest was marked with bruises, but he stood tall. Even his pain made him breathe hard. Opposite him stood the royal champion, a creature of muscle and war, standing over 9 feet tall, with jagged teeth and 4 arms. The crowd cheered as the champion raised his blades. He had never lost a battle. He had broken warriors, crushed bones, and ended kings. Now he was ordered to destroy the human in front of him. Above the arena, seated in a golden balcony, the alien princess watched closely. Her name was Ziriah. Her eyes, glowing silver, followed every move of the human. She had sent her champion to crush this earthborn man, to remind the galaxy that humans were weak and unfit to challenge the Empire. A trumpet sounded. The fight began. The champion roared and charged like a falling wall. Dust kicked up behind him. His blades sliced the air, but Cain didn't move back. He stepped to the side, fast, low, and smart. The blade missed by inches. The champion growled. "This is not a dance, human," the beast shouted. Cain didn't answer. He just looked up at the giant warrior with calm eyes. Eyes that said he had already been through worse. The champion swung again, a blade coming down like thunder. This time it hit, cutting across Cain's arm. Blood sprayed. The crowd cheered, but Cain didn't fall. He staggered, grabbed a handful of dirt, and threw it into the champion's eyes. The alien blinked, surprised. Cain used the moment. He ducked low and slammed his shoulder into the warrior's gut. Not to hurt him, but to show, "I will not run." Ziriah leaned forward in her seat. She had seen many humans cry, beg, and crawl. But this one was smiling with blood in his teeth. The champion became angry, wild. He roared again and struck with both arms, knocking Cain to the ground. The human rolled, coughing. Pain screamed in his ribs. The crowd thought it was over. But again, he stood. His legs shook. His fists were empty. But his eyes were full of fire. In the silence, Ziriah spoke, her voice cold and sharp. "Why doesn't he stay down?" No one could answer her. The champion hesitated. He had crushed armies. Yet this single man, half-broken, weaponless, still stood with defiance. He felt something strange inside him. Not fear, not respect, something older, something sacred, like he was looking at a mirror of what it meant to fight without giving up. "You should be dead," the champion said, breathing hard. "Maybe," Cain replied, his voice hoarse. "But I'm not." He threw a punch. It was weak, but it landed. Not on the face, not on the body, but on the pride. And it hurt. The crowd was confused. Some booed. Others went silent. Ziriah stood from her throne. Her heart beat fast. Her face was calm, but her fingers curled tight. This was not the result she wanted. The human was supposed to break. Instead, he was showing her people something dangerous. Hope. Bell rang. The match was paused. 2 guards rushed in to carry Cain out, but he pushed them away and walked on his own, even if he limped with every step. As he passed beneath the royal balcony, Ziriah stepped forward. "Human," she said, loud enough for all to hear. "Why didn't you fall?" Cain looked up at her, blood dripping down his chin. He didn't bow. He didn't kneel. He simply answered, "Because I wanted you to see it." "See what?" "What a real fight looks like." The princess stared at him, stunned. Cain walked on, leaving behind silence. The champion stayed still in the arena, head lowered. That night, the Empire did not cheer victory. They whispered of the man who could not be broken. And in her dark chamber, Ziriah sat alone, staring at her own hand, the one that had gripped the balcony so tightly when he spoke. She didn't know it yet. But that human had just changed her fate. The princess who watched him bleed, the night after the arena fight, was not quiet. A storm rolled in from the northern skies, lightning flashing across the black clouds like cracks in glass. Thunder shook the royal towers. But inside the palace, the real storm was happening in the heart of Princess Siraya. She stood alone at the top of her silver tower, watching the rain fall over the blood-soaked sands of the arena below. Her champion, the warrior who had never lost, sat in silence, ashamed. And the human? He was still alive, still breathing, still dangerous. Siraya's hands were cold, even in the warmth of her chamber. The image of the human, Cain, standing again, and again refusing to fall, his eyes steady, his mouth bloody, kept playing in her mind like a ghost that wouldn't leave. Why didn't he break? She whispered to herself, not for the first time. No one answered. Not the guards, not her advisors, not even the storm outside. She had watched prisoners fall apart in that arena. Men, beasts, even machine-augmented gladiators, all had screamed, cried, or begged for mercy when faced with her champion. But not Cain. He bled, and smiled. He fell, and rose. He mocked death like it was just another opponent. And now, Siraya couldn't sleep. A message arrived at her door, sealed in red wax. Royal law required her to read it. By blood code, the unbroken, human must be offered sanctuary until judgment is passed, it read. No punishment, no exile, no death. Siraya's fingers tightened around the scroll. Law, always law. Even she, the princess of the empire, couldn't defy the sacred codes that protected warriors who survived the trial of champions. It was old tradition, older than her family's rule. She remembered something else too. If a warrior survives, the champion strikes and walks by his own will, he must be heard. He must be seen. Bring him to me, she ordered. Cain was dragged into the throne hall by 2 armored guards, though he wasn't resisting. His left arm was wrapped in cloth. Bruises covered his face, but he still walked upright. His eyes scanned the room slowly, measuring, not fearing. The hall was massive. Alien stone walls carved with images of ancient battles. Gold firelights flickered across black steel pillars. Hundreds of nobles stood watching from both sides, whispering, in their strange tongue. And at the far end, on a throne made of stardust crystal, sat Siraya. You are Cain of Earth? She asked, voice cold and sharp. I am, he said simply. You faced my champion. You did not win. I didn't have to. Murmurs spread like sparks. Siraya's eyes narrowed. Then why are you alive? Because something inside your champion didn't want to kill me. Gasps followed. The champion stood to the side, jaw clenched. He didn't deny it. Siraya stood slowly, stepping down from her throne. Her long robe dragged behind her like shadows. She walked up to Cain, who didn't flinch as she approached. They stood face to face, princess and prisoner. She raised one hand. He didn't move. She placed her palm gently against his bruised cheek. Everyone in the hall froze. That gesture, soft, simple, was more dangerous than any blade. In royal tradition, a touch upon a warrior's wound before witnesses was a claim, a silent vow, a bond. Siraya realized it a second too late. Her hand snapped back, her eyes wide. Take him away, she whispered. But it was done. Hours later, Siraya stood in the royal archive with 3 ancient priests. They bowed, faces hidden behind golden masks. You touched him, princess, the lead priest said, and he bled under your hand. The bond is witnessed. I meant nothing by it, Siraya replied sharply. I was curious, nothing more. Royal blood cannot claim by accident. So what does this mean? You are now engaged. Siraya stepped back, lips parting. To a human? Unless you challenge the bond through the trial of refusal, the priest said carefully. But be warned, if he survives that trial, then by law, you must marry him. Siraya walked out in silence. In the lower chambers, Cain was sitting on a stone bench, his back against the cold wall. A bowl of strange soup sat untouched beside him. He stared at his bandaged hand, thinking. He didn't know what would happen next. But he knew one thing. He had become a symbol, and symbols were either broken or worshipped. Footsteps echoed. The door opened, and Zariah stepped in, alone. She looked at him for a long time. "Why do you keep surviving?" she asked, voice quiet. "Because I still have things to do," he said. "You may have doomed yourself. Do you know what happens next? I've faced death 3 times this week. I'm not worried about marriage." Zariah almost smiled. "Almost. I was supposed to break you," she whispered. "Maybe," he replied. "But maybe you needed something else." Zariah didn't answer. She turned and left, but her hand once again lingered at her side, remembering the warmth of human skin, and far above them the empire stirred. Some called for exile, others for blood. But deep in her chest, the Princess of War felt something she had never known before. Fear, not of death, not of weakness, but of the human who refused to kneel. The champion who bowed first. The Empire had never seen this before. A human had survived the trial of the arena. A princess had touched him. And now, the Empire's strongest warrior, the undefeated royal champion, had not only failed to kill, but had lost something deeper, his honor. In the early hours of the morning, before the suns had risen, the royal champion walked alone through the halls of the palace. His name was Kratok. He had shattered skulls and torn giants in half. He had never doubted his fists, never bowed, never hesitated until now. His armor was still scratched from the battle. His forearms hung at his sides like weapons with no will. He passed by guards who stepped aside in silence, unsure of what to say. Even they could sense it. Something had changed in the air around Kratok. He climbed the crystal stairs to the tower of the throne room. The great doors opened before him. Golden light spilled through the windows, and standing near the edge of the balcony, overlooking the city, was Princess Zariah. She didn't turn to face him. "You came early." She said. "I couldn't sleep," Kratok replied. "Neither could I." The silence stretched. Only the sound of wind touching the high windows filled the space. Finally, Kratok stepped forward and knelt. The entire room froze. A champion had never bowed without command. "What are you doing?" Zariah asked sharply. "I lost," Kratok said. "You're still breathing, but he's still standing." Zariah turned, eyes narrowing. "You're telling me a human broke you?" Kratok looked up. His voice was calm, but full of something Zariah had never heard from him before. Not shame, not fear. Something older. Truth. He looked at me like I was already beaten. Not with strength, with purpose. He wasn't there to win. He was there to be seen. And for the first time, I didn't want to fight. Zariah stepped closer. "You humiliated me in front of the Empire." "No," Kratok said, meeting her gaze. "He did. And you watched it happen." Zariah's breath caught. She wanted to be angry, wanted to scream. But deep inside, she knew the truth, and that truth scared her. "Do you know what your bow means?" she asked coldly. "Yes," he said. "It means I now serve the one who proved stronger." "You think the human is stronger than me?" Kratok didn't speak. He didn't have to. His silence said it all. News spread fast. The champion had bowed to the human. The Empire's nobles erupted into chaos. Some demanded Cain be killed before the law could seal his bond to the throne. Others saw an opportunity. If a human could shake the princess, maybe the royal bloodline wasn't as sacred as they believed. Rebellion whispers began to crawl through the marble halls. Zariah sat on her throne, still as stone, while her advisors shouted around her. "Break the law!" one shouted. "Send the human back to his planet," barked another. "Silence!" Zariah finally yelled, rising to her feet. The hall fell quiet. "He lives because the law says he must," she said. "But if he wants my hand, he must pass the trial of bonfire." Shocked gasps filled the room. The bonfire was an ancient test, not of strength, not of war, but of spirit. It was meant to reveal the soul of a warrior, It could not be faked. And if failed, it burned the bond away forever. Siraya turned to her guards. Bring him. In the sacred garden, Cain was resting under a moonfruit tree. Alien birds chirped above. His arm still ached, but his spirit was calm. He had survived so much already. What more could they throw at him? He looked up as the guards approached. Again, he said with a tired smile. Cain was brought into a dark chamber deep beneath the palace. There were no walls, just shadows, flickering lights, and a single circular fire pit in the center. Siraya stood waiting in a black cloak. Her eyes met his. Do you know what this is? She asked. Another test? Cain replied. The final one. Step into the circle. Place your hand over the bonfire. And what happens if I fail? The fire will know. It will burn the lie out of you. And if I pass? Siraya hesitated. Then, we are one. By law. By blood. Cain took a slow breath. Then he stepped into the circle. He reached out his hand. The fire was not normal. It shimmered blue and violet, like stars, dancing. It wasn't hot, but it hummed like it was alive, like it watched. When Cain's hand hovered above the flames, his body froze. A vision flooded his mind. He saw Siraya, not as a princess, but as a lonely child, trained to rule, forced to obey. He saw her crying in a cold room. Then he saw himself, standing, in chains yet refusing to kneel. Two worlds, both broken, both needing something more. He gasped, and the fire pulsed. Not red, not angry, but gold, approval. The bonfire had chosen. Siraya's eyes widened. She stepped forward slowly. She had prepared to mock him, prepared to watch him fail. But now, her heart raced. He had passed. He had seen her. As they left the chamber, Cain walked beside Siraya in silence. Finally, he spoke. So, what now, princess? She didn't look at him. Now, you're my husband. Funny, he said. Didn't think marriage would start with fists and fire. Siraya almost smiled again, but behind her eyes, war was building. Because somewhere in the shadows of the empire, enemies were watching. They had just lost their champion, and now, they feared something worse. A human had taken the throne's heart, and they would not let it stand. Royal law demands a bond. The empire didn't sleep that night. Every screen, every broadcast, every noble hall whispered the same impossible truth. A human had passed the bonfire. Cain of Earth, a prisoner once called weak and lowborn, had survived the arena, bowed no knee, and now stood beside the princess of blood herself. But this was not love. This was law. And law in the empire was carved deeper than stone, older than the stars. Princess Siraya stood alone in the chamber of vows, staring at the ancient text burned into the wall. Those who pass the bonfire must be sealed in unity before 3 moons. Rise, or the empire bleeds from within. It wasn't just tradition. It was survival. The empire's royal bloodline was tied to the cosmos through spiritual law. If Siraya refused the bond, if she stepped away now, it wouldn't only destroy her. It would collapse the line of power her ancestors had guarded for 10,000 cycles. And that meant one thing. She had no choice. She had to marry the human. The bye. Next day, Cain was brought into a new chamber. This one quiet, dim, full of strange glowing plants and mist. A dozen alien priests stood in a circle. Their robes shimmered like ink under moonlight. Cain stepped inside, confused. Where am I now? He asked. The chamber of claiming. A priest replied in a deep voice. Sounds romantic. It is not. The priests circled him. You passed. The bonfire, they said together. Now royal law demands the final ritual, the sealing. What does that mean exactly? You and the princess must each spill a drop of blood into the star chalice. If you both do it willingly, the bond is complete. She becomes yours. You become hers. For life, no matter what happens next. Cain paused. And if one of us refuses? The blood will burn, and both souls will suffer. Cain looked around, then laughed quietly. You people really take marriage seriously. The door opened behind him. Zariah entered wearing black ceremonial armor edged with silver flames. Her eyes met his. Unreadable. Cold. But something behind them trembled. The priests handed her a small blade, curved, ancient, and sharp. She walked to the center. Cain followed. We don't have to do this, she whispered, low enough only he could hear. Do you want out? Cain asked. Zariah didn't answer. I'll go, Cain said softly. If that's what you want. She looked at him, longer this time. Then she cut her palm. A thin line of blood shimmered purple under the mist. It dripped into the star chalice. Cain blinked. Without a word, he took the blade and did the same. His red blood fell into the cup. A moment passed. Nothing. Then light exploded from the chalice, gold, bright and wild. A sound echoed deep like a bell shaking the bones. The air burned. The floor hummed. The priest fell to one knee. The bond is sealed, they said. By law, by blood, by flame. Zariah stepped back. Cain just stared at his hand. His wound had already closed. So, he muttered, we're married. Zariah turned without answering and left the chamber. But behind her, her fingers curled like they were still holding his hand. The Empire erupted in panic and awe. Princess Zariah has bound herself to a human. Some said it was a sign of doom. Others said it was a new beginning. But in the shadows of the outer systems, a group of old nobles met in secret. These were not just men and women. They were warlords, generals, and high priests who had waited years to take control. Now they had their chance. She bonded with an outsider, said one, a thick-scaled woman with fire in her voice. We all saw it. The line is tainted. Then let's burn the bond, another growled. Cut out the disease before it spreads. They agreed. A plan was set. The human would not live long enough to see the next moon. That night, Cain sat on the balcony of his new room. Still not used to the view. He looked out over the glowing city, ships flying past towers, lights flickering in strange colors. It was beautiful and alien, like living inside a dream he didn't ask for. The door behind him opened. Zariah stepped out, still in armor. You haven't run, she said. Should I? If you had any sense, yes. Cain chuckled. You think this is the worst thing I've been through? Zariah didn't smile, but her eyes softened. They won't accept this, she said. You, us, this bond. It was supposed to break you. Then maybe it broke something else instead. She walked to the railing, standing beside him. I've lived my whole life under laws older than my name, Zariah whispered. I've killed for those laws. I've watched my own sister die because of them. And now you're stuck with me. Yes. How do you feel about that? Zariah turned to him slowly. I don't know yet. A quiet pause. But behind them, across the stars, something was coming. The plot against Cain had begun. A hidden fleet, a team of elite hunters, and one exiled assassin who had once loved Zariah before her rise to power, and now wanted the human dead for stealing the throne she never offered. The stars would soon bleed again. But for now, the human and the princess stood under a moon that no longer belonged to just her, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel alone. She tried to intimidate him. He made her laugh. The marriage ceremony was complete. The bonfire had accepted their blood, and now the Empire watched with sharpened breath, expecting Cain to obey, kneel, or simply fade into Zariah's shadow like some royal pet. He did not. Instead, on the morning after their binding, he stepped out of the royal chamber wearing borrowed armor 2 sizes too big, scratching his head and asking the royal butler, "Hey, which way?" to the bathroom. The guards didn't know whether to arrest him or bow. Zariah, from her throne room, saw it all on the security screen. She stared at the image, Cain yawning, joking with a confused alien maid, eating strange fruit like it was an apple. And her eyes narrowed. He's not adjusting, said her advisor quietly. He's not supposed to, she replied. Then she stood. Bring him to the combat hall, she ordered. Alone. 30 minutes later, Kane walked into the wide marble hall, surrounded by glowing weapons and training dummies shaped like beasts. The air smelled like oil and steel. Siraya stood at the far end wearing tight combat armor, her long hair tied back. No crown, no guards, just her. Kane raised an eyebrow. What's this? Your first lesson, she said coldly. In what? How to look scary in leather. Her eyes flashed. You need discipline, training, control. You are now Prince Consort of the Empire. Act like it. Kane shrugged. I'm just a guy who got thrown in an arena. And now you're married to me, which means the Empire expects strength. Then maybe you should teach me, he said, stepping forward. Princess. Siraya moved fast, like lightning. Her fist struck toward his chest, but Kane stepped aside, catching her arm without thinking. She twisted, and they both spun, ending. In a strange dance, half fight, half grip, their bodies pressed, breath shared, time slowed. She pushed away, breathing hard. He was still smiling. You smile too much, she said, annoyed. You try dying 6 times in a week. It makes everything else funnier. She lunged again. This time Kane ducked and spun her gently, but with just enough force to shift her balance. Siraya stumbled slightly. Then, she laughed, only for a second. But it happened. The sound bounced through the room like a small bell, surprising both of them. She quickly turned away. You're dangerous, she said. Why? Because I made you laugh? Because you don't fear me, and I don't know how to control that. Kane sat down on one of the stone benches nearby. Maybe it's not about control, he said. Maybe it's about trust. Siraya turned to him slowly. Trust is for people who have something to lose. Don't you? Don't. She didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the wall and tapped a button. The screens lit up, showing dark ships moving through distant space. Silent. Hidden. A war fleet is coming, she said. Not from Earth. From within our own borders. Nobles who hate what we've done. Kane stood. Then let's face them. You speak like a warrior, Siraya said softly. I speak like someone who has nothing left to run from. For a moment, she just looked at him. Not like a ruler, not like a fighter, just a woman. Curious, cautious, but no longer cold. She walked past him, then stopped. You need better armor, she said. Agreed. This thing pinches. Siraya smiled again, just slightly, then left the room. In the darkness of a distant moon, a ship landed in secret. Inside it stood the assassin known as Veshtar, once a prince of the bloodline. Once the one Siraya was meant to marry before the old wars destroyed his name. Now he was just a shadow with a blade. He watched the screens showing Siraya and Kane training together. Laughing, growing close. He felt no anger, only purpose. Kill the human, came the command in his earpiece. Make it look like an accident. Veshtar nodded. His blade was already warm. Later that night, Kane was walking back to his chamber when he felt something strange, like the air itself had gone quiet. No guards, no footsteps, no sound, just silence. He stopped. Then a whisper behind him. You don't belong here. He turned, but no one was there. A blade sliced toward his throat. He ducked just in time, stumbling back. The attacker moved like smoke, silent, fast, precise. Kane rolled, grabbing a staff from a display wall. I don't know who you are, he said, breath shaking, but you should have brought backup. Veshtar struck again. They clashed in the hall, metal against wood, light flashing. Kane fought with raw instinct. No training, just survival. But he remembered pain, remembered the arena. He used it. He broke the rhythm of the assassin. Veshtar stepped back, surprised. You're better than you look. Thanks. I get that a lot. A blade sliced across Kane's shoulder. Blood dripped. But he didn't fall. From the side, a sudden pulse rang out. Siraya arrived, armor on, blade in hand. "You touch him," she said, voice like thunder. "You die." Veshtar looked at her. "You chose him over me," he said. "I was royal." "You were nothing," she replied. In one swift move, she struck. Veshtar vanished into smoke, escaping but not without injury. Siraya rushed to Kane, grabbing his arm. "Are you hurt?" she asked. He looked at her, eyes tired but steady. "You really do care," he said. Siraya didn't speak. But her grip on his hand said enough. The attack had failed. But the war had only just begun, and now they would have to stand together. Not as strangers, not as enemies, but as something more. Assassins in the Moon Garden. The Royal Moon Garden was a place meant for peace. Crystal flowers bloomed in soft blue light shaped like stars. The air was warm, filled with glowing pollen that danced like fireflies. It was the only place in the Empire where even warlords walked barefoot in silence. But tonight, blood would touch those sacred stones. Princess Siraya stood at the gardens, edge silent as the moonlight spilled across her armor. Beside her, Kane adjusted his new black uniform, a gift from the palace guards, tailored to fit the strange human who had somehow become royalty. "This doesn't feel like a garden walk," he muttered, eyes scanning the shadows. Siraya didn't respond at first. Her eyes were watching the stars. "This garden is where my mother was poisoned," she finally said. Kane blinked. "Wow. Okay, that's not exactly romantic." "She died kneeling beside that fountain," Siraya continued, pointing, smiling, "because she thought she was safe." Kane followed her gaze. "And you brought me here. Why?" Siraya turned to him. "Because if they're going to try again, they'll do it here." "What makes you so sure?" "Because I'd do the same." They didn't wait long. From the far edge of the garden, 3 cloaked shapes emerged from behind the crystal. Trees. They moved with silent feet, blending into the mist. But Kane saw them first. "Company," he said, stepping in front of Siraya. The assassins didn't speak. They attacked. The first moved like a blur, 2 blades drawn, striking toward Siraya's throat. She spun, blocking with her forearm, countering with a sharp elbow to the assassin's chest. He flew back, crashing into the fountain. The second came for Kane. This one was smaller, faster, but Kane had learned, not from training but from pain. He dodged low, then tackled the assassin into the dirt. They rolled, fists flying, blades flashing past his ear. "You guys don't talk much, huh?" Kane grunted, blocking a strike with his forearm. The third assassin didn't join the fight. He walked calmly toward the center of the garden, toward the altar stone once used for royal blessings, and from his cloak. He pulled out a small black orb. Siraya's eyes widened. "Kane!" she shouted. "Bomb!" Kane kicked the assassin off him and ran, diving toward the orb as it began to glow red. The third assassin whispered something in an alien tongue. The bomb clicked, and then it stopped. The light faded. Nothing exploded. Kane looked down at the device, breathing hard. "Huh. Lucky wires?" the assassin snarled. "You don't understand anything, human." Kane stood holding the bomb. "You're right. I don't understand why you all hate me so much. I married someone, big deal." "You shamed our empire," the assassin growled. "You were meant to die in the arena. Instead, she touched you. And now she's yours. We belong to no one," Siraya said coldly, walking toward them, her blade covered in blood. "You changed the laws," the assassin spat. "You broke the bloodline." "No," she replied. "I claimed it back." Siraya struck without warning. The assassin's head snapped back and he collapsed. Silence returned to the garden. Blood ran down the altar stone. Minutes later, guards rushed in, but the threat had already passed. Medics checked Kane's arm where a blade had grazed him. He waved them off. "Just a scratch," he said. Siraya sat beside the fountain, silent again. "They're not going to stop," she whispered. Not until one of us is dead. Cain sat beside her. Then let them come. You don't get it, Zariah said, her voice lower now. You think this is just politics. It's not. You weren't supposed to survive the arena. You weren't supposed to be seen in the fire. And you definitely weren't supposed to pass the bond. But I did? Yes. And now the empire is divided. Some want to see you crowned. Others want your head. And the worst part? She looked at him. I don't know which side I'm on yet. Cain didn't answer right away. He stood, walking to the edge of the garden where the flowers still glowed. He touched one. Soft. Fragile. I didn't ask for any of this, he said. But I'm here. And I'm not running. Zariah stood beside him. They'll come again. Then we fight again. You'll die one day, Cain. Then let it be for something real. Zariah stared at him. And for the first time, something inside her cracked. Not weakness. Not fear. Just understanding. She reached for his hand. He let her. And above them, on a rooftop in the dark, a single figure watched. Veshtar. He hadn't struck tonight. He was waiting. The assassins were pawns. He was the checkmate. And next time, he would not miss. That night, as Cain slept with a blade under his pillow and Zariah stood guard by the window, the Empire's fate moved one step closer to the edge. Not because of a war, but because of a bond no one could understand. A bond between two souls who were never supposed to meet and now couldn't be separated. From weapon to husband, by her own vow, the Empire was breaking. From the outer moons to the inner cities, rebellion ships circled the sky. Banners of old bloodhouses rose again, each one calling Cain the outsider, Prince and Zariah the traitor bride. And still Cain stood beside her, but even he could feel it. The end was coming. In the royal war chamber, generals argued across long tables. Voices clashed, plans failed, maps burned, and Zariah? She said nothing. Not until a messenger ran into the hall, breathing hard, eyes wide with fear. He's here, the soldier gasped. Veshtar has entered the palace. The room froze. Zariah's jaw tightened. Where? She asked. The Star Tower. He challenged you both. Said if you don't face him before the next moonrise, he'll destroy the bonfire. Gasps rang out. Destroying the bonfire wouldn't just end Zariah and Cain's bond. It would erase all royal vows in the Empire, past and future. Chaos would follow. War. Collapse. Blood. Prepare the ship, Zariah ordered. But Cain stepped forward. No, he said. I'll go alone. The room turned to him. What? Zariah snapped. He doesn't want you, Cain said. Not really. He wants me. He's coming for the human who took his future. You're not bait, Cain. I'm not a prince either, he said softly. But I am yours. And I made a choice the day I spilled blood in that fire. Zariah stared at him. I said I didn't know which side I was on, she whispered. And now? Her voice cracked for the first time. Now I'm on yours. The Star Tower stood like a needle in the clouds. High above the rest of the city, wrapped in wind and lightning, it had once been a place of worship. Now it waited like a final battlefield. Cain entered alone. He wore no armor, only the bonfire mark across his chest, glowing faint gold. At the top, Veshtar stood waiting, cloak off, twin swords drawn, red lights flickering across his eyes. You came, he said. You talk more than your friends, Cain replied. Veshtar didn't smile. She was mine. Before the throne, before the bloodline. We were chosen. Then maybe that was the problem, Cain said. She was never supposed to be owned. Veshtar attacked. Steel screamed. Their blades clashed in the open air, lightning flashing around them. Veshtar was faster, trained, deadly. Cain fought. With raw instinct, no technique, just survival. But survival had kept him alive this long. Veshtar slashed across Cain's shoulder. Blood sprayed. Cain dropped his blade. he stumbled. Veshtar moved in for the kill, but a voice rang out. Enough. Siraya. She stood at the edge of the tower, eyes glowing, sword drawn. You touch him again, she said, and I will erase your name from this world. Veshtar hesitated. Just enough. Cain used the moment. He drove a hidden blade, small, sharp, stolen from a guard, into Veshtar's side. The assassin gasped, stumbling back. Siraya rushed forward and struck, knocking him to the edge. Veshtar, bleeding, looked up at her. He's not one of us, he said. No, she replied. He's better. She turned her back. Veshtar tried one last strike, and Cain, standing behind him now, caught his wrist. I was never yours to break, he whispered. Then he let go. Veshtar fell. Silence. Hours later, the Empire watched. Not a fight, not a war, a vow. On the steps of the bonfire temple, Siraya stood before the galaxy, dressed not as a princess, but as a woman who had chosen her future, and beside her, hand in hand, stood the human. No longer just a prisoner, no longer a warrior, not even a prince, just hers. Siraya raised her voice to the skies. I claimed him once with a touch. I bound him by flame. But today, in front of all that remains, I name him not by law but by heart. She turned to Cain. You were sent here to die. You stood when none expected it. You saw me not as a weapon, but as someone who needed saving, too. Tears formed in her eyes. You are not my husband because of blood or law. You are my husband because I choose you. Now. And always. Cain, breathing slowly, took her hands. I thought I was nothing, he said. Just a body in the sand. But you looked at me and gave me meaning, so I'm not going anywhere. The bonfire glowed, brighter than ever. And across the Empire, for the first time in centuries, there was peace. Not because of war, not because of fear, but because one human, armed with only will and heart, stood tall where giants had fallen, and a princess trained to rule with an iron hand gave everything up. For love. That night in the quiet of the royal garden, Siraya rested her head on Cain's shoulder. I still don't understand how you did it, she whispered. Did what? Survived. Changed me. Cain smiled. Maybe I didn't. Maybe you were always waiting for someone to see you. She looked up at him, and for once there was no crown, no armor, just two broken people, whole again, together.